Yeah. Yeah, man.
Everything I'm about to tell you is classified. I actually signed a non-disclosure agreement saying I wouldn't do exactly what I'm about to do. I'm writing this from a cafe in a big city and I'm leaving the country immediately after sharing this. I don't know exactly where I'm gonna go or if I'll be safe there, but I have to get this out. Even if it gets taken down after a few hours or even minutes. You should all copy this onto your hard drive, maybe print it out in case they hack you to delete everything. All traces of what happened. You all need to know what goes on in secret laboratories with your tax dollars and without your consent. Let me explain who I am without giving away too much. I hold a PhD in computer science from Stanford University, and I work as part of a research staff at SAIL, the Stanford Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. Yesterday evening, a nondescript man in a dark suit came into my office at SAIL and asked if I would be interested in serving as a consultant for an experiment conducted by the government. Now, when I asked if he could provide any details, he simply said he could not, but that if I said yes, I would need to leave within the hour and would be gone for about 24 hours. He also said I would be well compensated for my time. My interest was piqued and I didn't have any appointments for the next few days, so I agreed. Now we left in a black SUV and then swung by my apartment so I could grab a change of clothes and my toothbrush before heading to the airport. I was driven directly onto the tarmac to a small chartered jet that sat in wait on a runway, engine running. I walked up the ramp and into the cabin and found that beside my dark, unsmiling handler, I was the only passenger. I was not told or given any details on where we were going, but I was told I could read or watch a movie, but I chose to just relax and take a nap. After a long day of work at SAIL, I was out cold within 20 minutes. My handler woke me as we touched down in the darkness. He led me off the plane toward a waiting SUV, exactly the same make and model as the one we had used in California. I looked over the hood of the car and saw the unmistakable skyline of Lower Manhattan and immediately knew I was in New York, probably at JFK. I entered the car with my handler and dozed off again as we began driving towards the city. I woke up again as we arrived to our destination in downtown. I immediately recognized it as the AT&T Long Lines building at 33 Thomas Street. It's a brutal design, a completely concrete building that features no windows on any of its 29 floors. Now, most people assume it is a secret NSA facility designed to eavesdrop on the countless signals coursing across New York at any given moment. We passed through several layers of security before entering the small lobby on the ground floor as I was led to a small conference room down a long hallway lit with oppressively bright fluorescent lights. I was one of 8 occupants of the room and, well, it seemed I was also the last one to arrive, because the meeting started as soon as I sat down. A bald man at the head of the table introduced himself as the project leader for the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, or DARPA. The 7 of us, all leading scientists in the areas of artificial intelligence or cognitive brain function, had been invited to observe an experiment conducted by his team. A pad of paper and a pen would be provided for us to take notes. Everything we saw or heard in this building, especially in this room, was classified. Our notes would be confiscated after the experiment, and we would be required to sign a non-disclosure agreement that featured a lengthy prison sentence if we violated it. They were merely interested in our thoughts and reactions. It was now 2 a.m., and the experiment would begin promptly at 8 a.m. We would each be given a room in the building to sleep or work if we wished until the experiment began. That was all. I was led to a small, windowless room that featured a twin-sized bed, a small desk with a chair, and the smallest bathroom I have ever seen. I was locked inside and told to use the room phone to dial 101 if I needed anything. Breakfast was at 7:30 a.m. I undressed and again went to sleep. I received a wake-up call at 7:15 a.m. I took a quick, uncomfortable shower and dressed in some semi-professional clothes. My room was unlocked at 7:25 a.m. and I was led to a small cafeteria where the 7 of us experts ate pastries and drank coffee. We chatted briefly, but nobody had any idea what we were about to see, other than it had to do with AI research. We were excited at the possibility of witnessing something groundbreaking, but worried we would be denied the opportunity to ask certain questions or use the knowledge in any way. At 7:55 a.m., we were led to an observation room that overlooked a large circular space. A single dentist chair sat in the center of the room, surrounded by electronic instruments and computer screens. Much like a surgical room at a teaching hospital, our observation deck was separated from the room below by thick glass and featured a video screen that would show zoomed-in footage or whatever procedure occurred in the main room. The sounds from within would be captured by microphones and piped to us through a speaker system. We were all seated comfortably. The same bald man from the night before entered our room, stood in front of the glass, and told us what we were about to see. The project's code name was Daniel. The research subject we were about to meet would also be referred to as Daniel, though that was obviously not his real name. Now, the DARPA man told us that Daniel had suffered a partial brain injury in a vehicle accident in New York 2 months earlier. His airbag had not deployed properly. A vehicle recall had been sent out, but he had not had the problem fixed, causing his head to hit the steering wheel and the front of his brain to hit the front of his skull, damaging his prefrontal cortex beyond repair. He had no family or next of kin to act as power of attorney. When it became clear the man would not wake up from his coma, the government took over his care and transferred him to their facility at 33 Thompson Street. Once there, the Daniel team kept him alive on life support while they designed their experiment, using a combination of electronic, biochemical, and quantum engineering. I won't go into all the boring technical details here. They had attempted to design a computer that would replace the Daniel's prefrontal cortex and mimic his functions. They had installed their computer in his head 2 weeks earlier. The plan for this morning was to bring him in, still on life support and sedated, sit him in a chair, and wake him up. If he was alive and lucid, there were a series of test questions he would be asked. With our expertise, we were invited to simply watch and provide some analysis after it was all over. Before any of us could ask any questions, the man held a radio up to his face and told whoever was on the other line to bring in Daniel. A set of double doors opened on the opposite side of the large room below, and a man in a wheelchair was pushed towards the middle, followed by a life support machine on wheels and a metal tree with an IV bag being fed to his arm. He was lifted by 2 orderlies and transferred into the dentist's chair at the center of the room. 5 technicians then approached him to check his status. After a minute or two, they seemed satisfied. Then one technician lifted a black fiber optic cable and plugged it into a slot just above Daniel's right temple. He then plugged the other end of the cable into a computer tower, which fed information to the screens spread around the room. He looked to his colleagues, who nodded at him each in turn before he typed a series of short commands into his computer. When he finished, he hesitated for 2 long seconds, then pressed enter. At first, nothing happened. The seconds stretched on, and as I was about to release the breath I had been holding for what seemed like hours, is when Daniel's eyes flickered rapidly. his head jerking to his left, then right. Several of us in the observation room then jumped in fright. I thought I even saw a couple of technicians below act startled. Well, after a few minutes, Daniel's eyes settled down and remained open. His eyes were blank, expressionless, the pupils only slightly dilated. His breathing and heart rate had sped up, but then returned to a steady state of rest.
"Daniel, can you hear me?"
one of the technicians asked. Daniel continued to stare blankly for a few seconds before his head snapped towards the technician who had asked the question. His eyes focused intently on the man's face. The technician repeated the question.
"Daniel, can you hear me?"
Daniel's jaw snapped open wide, like a snake preparing to consume its prey. It began making a low, guttural sound that grew into intensity, rising through the octaves of his vocal range and peaking in an incredible, inhuman scream. Then, silence. Taking this as a sign of acknowledgement, the technician moved on to a new question.
"Daniel, what is 2 plus 2?
Daniel continued to stare unblinkingly at the technician. After a few moments, he replied in a booming voice.
One. The answer is 4.
Everyone in attendance looked around with looks of amazement. The machine was communicating through biological means and answering questions. This was a watershed moment for biology and computer science, even humanity. I can't begin to describe the stunned silence that permeated the room. The technician asked another question.
"Daniel, what is 5 times 4?
Daniel took less time to answer this time.
5 equals 20.
The technician asked several more mathematical questions of increasing difficulty and complexity. Daniel answered correctly each time, albeit in his booming, unemotional voice. The technician then moved on to another line of inquiry. He held up a photo of a handful of sunflowers in a blue vase sitting on a wooden table. And he then asked,
"Daniel, what color are the flowers?"
Daniel's eyes snapped from the technician to the photo. He stared for nearly a minute, his eyes darting quickly around the photo, seeming to examine every inch. Finally, he answered.
Red, 2, 3, 7, green, 2, 4, 1, blue, 3.
Daniel had understood the color of the flowers in terms of red, green, and blue, like an electronic visual display. The technician looked less than pleased and moved on to another question.
"Daniel, how does the flower make you feel?"
Daniel again stared at the flower. The technician repeated the question several times, but Daniel still sat and stared. After nearly 8 minutes of silence, Daniel's eyes snapped from the photo to the technician. His face and eyes had a strange look, an unsettling mixture of confusion, horror, and intense loathing. He thundered,
Daniel does not understand.
The technician began to put the photo away when suddenly Daniel sat up and leaned closer to the technician. Again, but with much more anger in his voice. He screamed,
Daniel does not understand.
The technician began to back away, but Daniel was way too close. With lightning quickness, he grabbed the technician by his arm. He easily slipped out of the light strap that had been holding him in his chair. The IV lines ripped out of his arms, yet he still showed no pain or emotion. He began violently shaking the technician, reaching for his neck with both hands and trembling with a vicious power.
Daniel does not understand. Daniel does not understand.
The orderlies returned with needles in hand to sedate him, but Daniel thrashed, swinging his arms like clubs, bashing the faces and bodies of the orderlies and other technicians in the room. Suddenly, several men with guns entered the room and pointed them at Daniel, shouting at him to lie on the ground. Through it all, Daniel continued to scream.
Daniel does not understand. Daniel does not understand.
We were quickly ushered out of the observation room. I heard several gunshots before the door closed. We were ordered to surrender our notebooks and sign a thick non-disclosure agreement that I didn't read. I left the building as quickly as I could. They gave me a plane ticket back to San Francisco, but I decided to take a cab to the nearest cafe. And I've been writing this testimony all day. I'm not going back to San Francisco. I'm telling my story here, and then I'm going into hiding. I'm just one scientist, but this crossed the line in terms of ethics, technology, and basic humanity. I'll do my work from the shadows, trying to stop the freak show I witnessed from happening again.